This is my way too early ranking of every NBA team for the 2027 season. Now, as I just said, it is extremely early, so don't take every single placement as something that's absolutely locked in. But based on how every roster currently looks, this is where I've got them ranked. And we're going to be separating all 30 teams into 5 tiers of title contention. The higher up the list we get, the more serious the title conversations become. But first, we have to begin at the bottom. And in this group, we've got the Nets, Kings, Grizzlies, Pelicans, Bucks, Suns, Bulls, and Clippers. Some of these teams are rebuilding. Some of them probably should be rebuilding, the Pelicans, and others are still trying to be competitive even if the ceiling isn't very high. But now, let's move on to tier number 4, the play-in teams. And kicking us off at number 22, we've got the Washington Wizards. Trae Young, Anthony Davis, and AJ Dubbanza is just way too much talent to be in the bottom group. The health and the depth are still concerns, but Washington should actually be a pretty competitive team next season, especially when their main guys are available. Now coming in at 21, I've got the Dallas Mavericks. Kyrie Irving is going to be back next season, and alongside of Cooper Flagg and Derek Lively, that's a pretty decent squad. Cooper Flagg was phenomenal as a rookie last season, and if he takes some enormous leap next season, they could be well above 21. Now coming in at 20, I've got the Atlanta Hawks. They were competitive last season, and yes, they technically had the most successful series against the New York Knicks, taking them to a league-best 6 games. But ultimately, I think Atlanta are just a little bit flat. They're not quite a team that you look at and just absolutely fear them. And because of that, this is where they land. Now, at number 19, I've got the Portland Trail Blazers. You've got Ja Morant joining Damian Lillard, and that right there is going to be one of the more entertaining offensive backcourts in basketball. And that's because I do expect Ja Morant to have a big-time bounce-back season. Offensively, that's going to be awesome, but defensively, that's going to be sickening, because Ja and Dame is going to be the worst perimeter defensive backcourt in the NBA, and it's not going to be remotely close. So even with Ja Morant having a bounce-back season, I still think that that floor is so large that this is where they're going to end up. Now, coming in at number 18, I've got the Charlotte Hornets. Trading LaMelo Ball definitely lowered their immediate ceiling, but it may have created a cleaner long-term path to build around Con Knipple and Brandon Miller. Next season, though, I still think they're going to be competitive, but without LaMelo setting everybody up and raising the floor of their offense, there are definitely going to be nights where everything just looks a lot more difficult. And now, coming in at 17, at the top of this tier, I've got the Orlando Magic. Paolo Banchero and Franz Wagner still give them elite top-end talent, and their physical defense does make them a really difficult team to size up against. Hiring Sean Sweeney from San Antonio gives me a lot of hope that their offense can finally become more structured and dangerous next season. But Orlando still have to prove to me that they can score consistently and stay healthy before they go into the next tier. But if the coaching staff can add more movement into the offense, create better spacing and flow, then this team really is capable of taking a big leap forward next season. But now, let's get into the next tier, what I'm calling dangerous but flawed. Every one of these teams is going to be a threat, but there's one clear flaw that's going to hold them back. And starting off this tier at number 16, I've actually got the Golden State Warriors. Yep, Steph Curry is still Steph Curry. Jimmy Butler is going to be back next season. Kristaps Porzingis signing on is interesting. And Yaxel Lendenborg gives them a ready-made rookie at a position of need. But the fact of the matter is, this team is old, thin, and feels like it's being held together by tape. One injury or one cold stretch could really derail their entire season. And this might be shocking, but coming in at number 15, I've actually got the Utah Jazz. The reason I have them over the Warriors is because I believe Darren Peterson is going to be a ready-made 20-plus points per game scorer right out of the box. And pairing him with Keontae George gives Utah one of the more exciting backcourts in basketball. Then you've got Lauri Markkanen and Jaren Jackson Jr. at the forward spots, giving them size, shooting, and a legitimate defensive backbone. Like, they've got a pretty interesting squad over there. And yeah, Utah are young and they're going to be inconsistent, but the talent is just impossible to ignore at this point. Darren Peterson is capable of playing on or off the ball, which should make his fit much cleaner than typical rookie backcourts. Now, coming in at number 14, I've got the Los Angeles Lakers. Luka Doncic obviously gives any team an enormously high floor. Austin Reeves is going to be the clear number 2 option next season, and Walker Kessler is the kind of center that should fit perfectly next to Luka. The problem, though, is everything after that, because LeBron, Rui Hachimura, Marcus Smart, and Luke Kennard are all gone. That's a lot of real NBA talent leaving a roster, and the guys that they brought in to replace them are just not quite at the same level. Luka Doncic is going to keep them dangerous, and he could really carry them much higher than this ranking during the regular season. But until the Lakers make another move, this roster is just way too thin for me to put them any higher than 14. Now, coming in at 13, I've got the Boston Celtics. They traded Jaylen Brown in the prime of his career for a 36-year-old Paul George. And I still do not understand how they thought that was going to make them any better. Jason Tatum, healthy, is going to be good enough to keep them relevant. But replacing a star in the prime of his career with a much older, far less reliable version just feels like a major step backwards. Maybe the draft capital that they got from this deal means there's another move in the works, but as I'm ranking this Celtics team right now, this is clearly where they land. Now, coming in at number 12, we've got the Houston Rockets. Man, last season started with so much promise. But then the Kevin Durant files came out, the morale collapsed, and the basketball went with it. Fred VanVleet coming back next year should help to organize the offense, while adding Marcus Smart should do some of the same, and getting Steven Adams back will give them that offensive rebounding point of difference that actually made them so good at the start of last season. Now, the Houston Rockets probably won't win more games than they did last season, but I expect them to be an overall better basketball team. VanVleet doesn't need to come back and be a star. He just needs to be someone who can calm possessions down and stop the offense from becoming an abomination. And until I can see that consistently happen on the floor, this is where the Rockets land. Now, coming in at number 11, I've got the Indiana Pacers. The last time we saw Tyrese Halliburton healthy, Indiana were in a Game 7 of the NBA Finals. And if he doesn't tear that Achilles, there's a real chance that we're talking about them as NBA champions. That deserves a ton of respect. But his recovery and the change at the center spot really create two major questions. Miles Turner made way more sense for Indiana's run-and-gun style basketball than Ivica Zubac does. Yeah, Zubac is good, but he's slower, more of a traditional operate out of the post type big man, and he may force Indiana to have to play slower. Now, the Pacers still have Siakam, Nesmith, Nembhard. They added Kelly Oubre, which I really like, and that gives them legitimate depth. But I still need to see how this new version is all going to come together. Now, coming in at number 10, I've got the Detroit Pistons. They won 60 games a year ago and finished as the number 1 seed in the East. But the off-season and the underwhelming playoff run have really opened up a giant concern, which was floor spacing. The additions of Isaiah Joe, Kevin Huerter, Taurean Prince, and John Collins will improve that spacing. But now they're playing a balancing act. all of those guys are not known as great defenders. So yeah, when those guys are out there, they're going to have a really well-spaced floor for Cade. But are they going to be able to defend at the same level? Probably not. But when Detroit leans back into Asar Thompson and Jalen Duren, then the defense will go back to that great level, but the offensive floor completely shrinks for Cade. That is the entire problem that I see with Detroit now. Every answer that they put out on the floor is just going to create a different weakness. Yes, Cade Cunningham is special, but I just need to see what this new version of the Detroit Pistons is going to be able to look like. Now, coming in at number 9, at the very top of this tier, I have the Cleveland Cavaliers. They made it all the way to the conference finals, but if we're honest, it was one of the least convincing runs to a conference finals that I've seen. They had to go through 2 7-game series to get there, and then got swept by the Knicks. Yes, Kenny Atkinson said that they statistically won the series, or whatever that means, but no mate, you got swept. Donovan Mitchell is excellent. Jarrett Allen is a solid big man, and Evan Mobley is one of the better defensive players in the NBA. But I still do not trust James Harden in the biggest games in the NBA playoffs. And the Harden-Mitchell backcourt really creates a point-of-attack defensive problem. And on top of that, they just lost Dean Wade, who was probably their best defensive option. So I expect the Cavaliers to win a ton of regular season basketball, but I still do not trust them when everything's on the line. Now let's get into tier 2, the teams that I can talk myself into. And at number 8, I've got the Minnesota Timberwolves. LaMelo Ball and Anthony Edwards is going to be the best backcourt in basketball, because LaMelo gives Minnesota that second offensive engine that they needed so desperately. Too much of last season was simply, Ant, can you go and please save us? Even when he was on 2 bad knees in the NBA playoffs. LaMelo is going to be able to come in, create easier shots, push the pace, and run the team whenever Edwards isn't in the game. The fit, I believe, is going to really work, because LaMelo covers Ant's playmaking weaknesses, while Ant can absorb some of LaMelo's defensive issues. But the roster is definitely thin now. Minnesota doesn't have a legitimate power forward as it stands right now, and Ayo Dosunmu would ideally be your 6th man instead of your starting small forward. The bench is even more concerning, because the best player coming off the Minnesota bench right now is probably Bones Highland. So yes, the LaMelo Anthony Edwards ceiling is real, but the front court and the depth have Minnesota at 8. Now, coming in at number 7, I've got the Miami Heat. Adding Giannis immediately gives you one of the best defensive foundations in basketball, especially when you're pairing him with Bam Adebayo. A lineup of Davion Mitchell, Andrew Wiggins, Giannis, and Bam are going to be able to switch, roam, blitz, and just make your life miserable. The problem, though, is the offense and the bench. Miami will still need more shooting, another ball handler, and more playable depth, because Bobby Portis, Pele Larson, and Fontecchio are just not good enough alone. This would probably be the most needed LeBron James team, because he could come in, organize the offense, and fix several weaknesses all at once. The reason I have Miami above Minnesota is simple. Giannis is a top 3 player in basketball even still. He's a proven champion, a proven MVP level player, and a far safer bet to carry a flawed roster. If he's healthy, fresh, and motivated, which I think he absolutely will be, Miami could be a nightmare next season. Now, coming in at number 6, I've got the Philadelphia 76ers. Tyrese Maxey, VJ Edgecombe, Jaylen Brown, Dean Wade, and Joel Embiid is a ridiculous amount of talent. And to have Anthony Simons as your 6th man on top of that just is ridiculous. Maxey was close to 30 a game last season. VJ was awesome as a rookie. And if Embiid can enter the season fresher than he has been in a while, that's another big tick as well. The concern for me, though, is how everyone is going to want the ball. Brown, Embiid, Maxey, and VJ all will need their touches, and there isn't some elite playmaker orchestrating all of it. The spacing, the hierarchy, and the decision-making I think could become messy. Still though, getting talent in the door is the hard part of building a contender, and Philadelphia's done that. Now you've got 4 dangerous players and a chance to make it all work. The talent level of this team feels like they should be in the top 5, but the fit of the group for me puts them at number 6. Now coming in at number 5, I've got the Toronto Raptors. Kawhi Leonard is coming back to the 6, and it's not just a nostalgia rerun, because he's joining a roster that I genuinely believe can help him win. Kawhi, Scotty Barnes, and Colin Murray-Boyles is a combination that creates a huge, physical, switchable front court that could be defensive hell. Toronto also has enough guard play and depth with Emmanuel Quickley, RJ Barrett, Jamal Shead, Jacoby Walter, and Jakob Poeltl. I think Scotty Barnes will be one of the very best number 2 options in basketball next season, while CMB should take another major step after how good he was in the playoffs a year ago. Even when Kawhi is probably going to miss games, Toronto will still have enough defense to survive his absence. Brandon Ingram leaving is just going to be addition by subtraction. Replacing him with Kawhi is a gigantic upgrade, giving you more defense and more playoff reliability. Now, the Kawhi Leonard aspiration Clippers story has just kicked up another storm, so we're going to have to see how that all plays out. But if he's cleared and the trade officially goes through, then I genuinely believe he has a chance to win another championship. Now, coming in at number 4 and at the highest spot in this tier, I have the Denver Nuggets. Yeah, their first round loss to Minnesota was a really ugly one, because once Aaron Gordon and Peyton Watson got hurt, their defense just completely collapsed. They were outmanned, outgunned, looked totally exhausted, and were exposed for how thin the roster actually was. But Denver was still unbelievably good offensively last year. Nikola Jokic remains a top 5 player in basketball. Jamal Murray is coming off one of the best regular seasons of his career, and the Nuggets looked as dominant as ever during that one healthy stretch that they had last season, closing the regular season with 12 straight wins. I genuinely believe it could have been a different story if Gordon and Watson were healthy, but when they do have just enough defense to cover for Jokic and Murray, Denver can still look like Denver. The concern though is that the window is closing quickly. As a Bucks fan, this team reminds me a lot of that late stage Milwaukee like 2 years ago, where the championship core still looks familiar, but the depth just continues to get thinner and the injuries begin to stack up with age. Denver can still win the title, but the margins for error are just getting thinner by the season. Now, let's enter the top tier. The teams who are the legitimate title favorites coming into the 2027 NBA season. And kicking it off at number 3, I have the New York Knicks. Now, Knicks fans are allowed to be annoyed with this take, because they just won the championship, and yet I've got 2 teams ahead of them, one of which that they actually beat in the finals. But this isn't me calling it a lucky title or a fluke, because New York genuinely won that series. The Knicks were so difficult because they could beat you in almost every conceivable way. They could attack the rim, shoot from 3, control the game from the mid-range area, or even run offense through Cat as an offensive hub in the post. Like, they could do it all offensively. On top of that, the core of Brunson, Bridges, OG, Josh Hart, and Cat all remain in place. However, losing Mitchell Robinson certainly hurts, but Andre Drummond is not a bad replacement at all. A guy who can really rebound, screen, and give you size off the bench. Because of that, New York is going to remain one of the better teams in the NBA next season. The reason that they're third is because going back-to-back is just incredibly difficult in this era. And there are still some soft spots defensively. Brunson and Cat can both be targeted, and I don't think San Antonio was really experienced enough to punish those weaknesses consistently in the finals. Now, I think New York probably wins roughly 50 games again. Then they'll turn into that terrifying team once the playoffs begin, because that's just how Jalen Brunson operates. And that's not me throwing shade. It's a smart thing. You'd rather be ready to go and playing your best in the playoffs than pointlessly fighting for a 60-win regular season just to be eliminated early on. Now, let's get into number 2, and here I've got the Oklahoma City Thunder. The reason is simple. I think they were and still are the better basketball team than New York. If the finals had been Knicks versus Thunder, I would have picked Oklahoma City to win that series. Their point of attack defense is just ridiculous. They can switch, swarm, force turnovers, they could have targeted Brunson better, they could have dragged Cat into actions more, and they just have that ability to make every possession so uncomfortable. That matchup would have been drastically different to the one that they got in San Antonio. Then you've got Shai Gilgeous-Alexander as the very best scorer in basketball. You can dislike his style all you want, but SGA just gets it done. Yeah, he did show us a few limitations in that Spurs series when the paint completely gets shut off, but he's still clearly a top 3 player in basketball. I expect another top 3 defensive season along with a top 10 offense. The Thunder are deep, physical, fast, and capable of turning games into absolute hell. On most nights, they'll be the best team on the floor, but even with that, there is still one group that I've got slightly ahead of them. Because coming in at number 1, I have the San Antonio Spurs. Sure, the NBA Finals did not go the way they wanted, but it was also their first legitimate playoff run. They won 62 games in the regular season, beat a playoff-hardened Minnesota team in the second round, and then made a 3-2 comeback against the defending champions and won the West. Like, that was genuinely as impressive as winning a title. Now, Victor Wembanyama, Steph Castle, and Dylan Harper are all going to be better next year. The addition of Tobias Harris is one that I actually really like, and their depth remains really strong, having either Julian Champagnie or Vassell likely coming off the bench. I have San Antonio first because I believe they're going to be elite on both sides of the floor. There's a real world where they end up top 3 on both sides of the floor, and I'd expect them to be at least top 5 both offensively and defensively. I believe if it was a Spurs team with even one more year of experience, they could have beaten New York in the finals. And now I think they're ready to take the next big leap that sees them as the best team in the NBA next season. But another team that I think will take a big time leap next season is the Utah Jazz. And that's because they just added rookie phenom Darren Peterson. And if you want to see just how NBA ready this guy already is, then you need to go ahead and watch this full breakdown video right now.